Hi, I'm Mary Kopczynski, the CEO of Regalytics. First of all, happy birthday to my little sister, number 9 of 9. Sharon, you're the best. And here's your update on this week's 18,594 regulatory alerts, one of which is about someone I know personally. So, congrats to Scott Lee for being appointed to Senior Counsel and Policy Advisor at the CFTC. Wow! One nice thing about the alerts being lower in the summer means that I can take my sweet time in reviewing them and especially seeing what's going on in other places in the world. So, the regulator of this week is Europe. I know it's technically a continent, but let's be honest, I could do whatever I want. So, let's begin with MiCAR, which is the Markets in Crypto Assets Regulations out of the EU. First and foremost, Europe is kind of like the United States in that there's a federal law, but then there's state laws. But in Europe, they're not federal, they're European Union laws. And instead of states, it's the individual countries like Italy, Germany, etc. Now, in the US, if there is a federal law, it typically has what is called federal preemption status, meaning it overtakes the rules of the states. But in Europe, there are directives and regulations. For directives, each state needs to implement their own version of that rule, whereas a regulation is much more like our federal government, it is the law of the land. So MiCAR is a rule about crypto that is the law of the land in all of the European Union. This regulation passed in October of 2022, but the reason it's so important right now is because it went into force on June 29th, just recently. So, what happens now is all the various European bodies that are supposed to enforce this particular regulation typically come out with what are called RTS, which are regulatory technical standards. This is the how you will do it, how you will report on it, how you will be judged, etc. And the devil's always in the details. So the EBA and ESMA came out with a bunch of draft technical standards on things like handling complaints in relation to digital assets. And also, I learned about a new digital product buzzword that hasn't seemed to pick up here in the States yet called ARTS, or Asset Reference Tokens. And this is apparently the European word for stablecoin. So you're welcome. Also, this week, there was a lot of discussion about the US EU data privacy framework and whether that regime is still working. To make something that's very complicated short, the EU was not totally in love with the way the US protects data. So we basically had to do stuff to please Europe. So, for example, our Attorney General had to set up a specific data protection review court that would allow people inside the United States to challenge our own government if they felt the intelligence community or the federal government was violating their data privacy rights. It's kind of the same thing we do to China and North Korea when we go and complain about their human rights abuses, except this is a situation where the EU is calling us out for not being great to our own people. Anyway, apparently we're all good to go now, and because of it, there is now a special site where companies can more easily share data between US and EU customers. I don't know, maybe it's only interesting to me because I find this stuff fascinating, but let's move on to the topic of the week, which is fines, 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 and more fines. First, the CFTC, the FTC, and the SEC all went after Celsius Network this week. The trouble with Celsius Network started as early as September of 2021 when the Texas State Securities Board called it on the carpet for basically issuing securities without being registered. That definitely did not stop the network from growing and claiming to be safer than a bank. And you know how the story goes. Bankruptcy, fraud, and possibly prison for the founder. BetterHelp, the therapy app, we knew was already in trouble for secretly selling personal customer data. The FTC finalized it, and the fine is $7.8 million, which will include partial refunds to customers. Frank, the scandal with the founder who lied about the number of student loan customers before selling the company to JPM, that lives on even longer. Now her chief revenue officer has personally been named by the SEC. Merrill Lynch got in trouble for failing to file suspicious activity reports, and they are paying a $6 million penalty. Raymond James got in trouble in multiple states for overcharging commissions. They have to pay $8 million in refunds to clients and $4 million in penalties. And while, yes, fines are always fun to report on, what I really love doing is being an oracle for more fines, which is honestly not that hard to do when you have Regalytics. I'm going to read one sentence to you. It says the following: the Federal Trade Commission, in conjunction with 101 federal and state law enforcers, will announce Operation Stop Scam Calls, a joint agency crackdown on telemarketers, lead generators, and voice over internet protocol service providers who are responsible for making or facilitating billions of illegal telemarketing calls. You tell me what's going to happen. Or this one: California Attorney General Rob Bonta today announced an investigative sweep through inquiry letters sent to large California employers requesting information on the company's compliance with the California Consumer Privacy Act with respect to the personal information of employees and job applicants. All right, so what else? The SEC adopted money market liquidity rules with associated changes to Form PF, for better or for worse. They also proposed changes to the broker-dealer customer protection rule that would change it so dealers have to report net cash they owe to customers daily instead of weekly. Mind you, the biggest broker-dealers do daily already, but with the large and mid-sized market, it may cause more mismatches and complexity if they're not ready for it. So the last one is fun, sort of. I think it is. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services realized that obese people lie about our weight. So much so that they have automatically adjusted self-reported weight for purposes of certain obesity studies by 40%. That's it this week for Regalytics. Join me every Wednesday for your dose of regulatory news.